The palazzo's torchlight flickered against marble walls as Niccolo Machiavelli sat across from a young diplomat who just returned from Florence, his face pale with confusion. The younger man's hands trembled as he spoke of a courtship gone catastrophically wrong. A woman he'd pursued with every romantic gesture imaginable had suddenly grown cold, while his rival, who'd barely acknowledged her existence, now held her complete devotion. Machiavelli listened in silence, then leaned forward with that knowing smile that had unsettled princes and popes alike. What he said next would shatter everything the young man thought he understood about desire, power, and the nature of attraction itself. That conversation, recorded in the margins of private correspondence from 1513, reveals something most men discover only after years of painful mistakes. We're taught from childhood that love operates like commerce. Invest enough attention, display enough virtue, demonstrate enough devotion, and affection will naturally follow. We learn the language of courtly romance, memorize poetry, practice grand gestures. We believe the world functions as our mothers and priests described it. Then reality strikes with the force of a Florentine dagger between the ribs. The young diplomat's story isn't unique. Walk through any modern city and you'll witness the same ancient pattern playing out in coffee shops and corporate offices, in dating apps and dinner parties. The attentive suitor who does everything right watches helplessly as the object of his affection gravitates toward someone who seems to break every rule he's been taught to follow. The devoted boyfriend who sacrifices his ambitions finds himself replaced by a man who puts his mission first. The nice guy finishes last while wondering what cosmic injustice governs the universe. But here's what Machiavelli understood that most men learn only when it's too late. The game was never about fairness. It was never about deserving. It was always about power, perception, and the hidden architecture of human desire that operates beneath the surface of our conscious awareness. Consider the fundamental error embedded in how we're raised to understand women. Society sells us a romantic fairy tale where the princess chooses the kindest heart, the most selfless soul, the man who loves her most purely. This narrative serves a useful social function. It keeps civilization stable, encourages pro-social behavior, prevents chaos. But like all useful myths, it obscures a more complex truth. Machiavelli knew that what maintains social order and what governs private desire often exist in complete opposition. The qualities that make you a good citizen rarely make you magnetically attractive. The philosopher observed something crucial in the courts of Renaissance Italy, where power and seduction intertwined like serpents. Women of intelligence and status consistently chose men who displayed what he called virtue, not virtue, in the moral sense, but a quality combining boldness, competence, and the ability to impose one's will upon circumstance. These women passed over countless suitors who offered devotion, security, kindness, all the approved virtues. Instead, they gravitated toward men who demonstrated mastery over their environment, who radiated certainty, who seemed to need nothing and no one. This pattern disturbed Machiavelli not because he judged it immoral, but because it revealed how profoundly our conscious beliefs diverge from our unconscious drives. The same woman who consciously values kindness finds herself inexplicably drawn to the man who challenges her. The same woman who says she wants emotional availability becomes distant when offered unlimited access to her partner's inner world. The same woman who claims to desire equality in a relationship loses respect for a man who consistently defers to her judgment. Why? The answer lies buried in layers of evolutionary psychology, social dynamics, and uncomfortable truths about human nature that polite society prefers not to examine. Women aren't consciously lying when they describe what they want. They're reporting their conscious preferences with complete sincerity. But beneath consciousness operates an ancient calculus that evaluates potential partners using criteria entirely divorced from modern sensibilities. Think about what actually happens in those early stages of attraction that determine everything that follows. A woman encounters two men. The first approaches with obvious interest, makes his intentions clear, offers compliments, seeks her approval, adjusts his behavior based on her reactions. The second barely seems to notice her, pursues his own interests with focused intensity. responds to her presence with mild interest at best, and demonstrates absolute comfort with her potential rejection. Which man triggers deeper attraction? Every dating coach and every ancient text on seduction provides the same answer, yet most men spend decades refusing to accept it. The first man, despite his genuine interest and good intentions, has already lost. He's communicated something that kills attraction at its root. He needs her validation more than she needs his. He's demonstrated that her opinion of him matters more than his opinion of himself. He's revealed that his sense of worth depends on her acceptance. And in making himself so available, so eager, so accommodating, he's eliminated the very thing that sparks genuine desire, the challenge of winning someone who doesn't need to be won. Machiavelli understood this dynamic in political terms. A prince who appears desperate to maintain power invites rebellion. A leader who seeks constant approval from subjects signals weakness. The same psychology governs attraction. The person who least needs the relationship holds the power within it. The person who seems complete unto themselves becomes irresistibly magnetic to others. This isn't about playing games or manipulation. It's about the fundamental reality that we're attracted to, what we perceive as higher value than ourselves, and value is largely communicated through behavior that signals abundance rather than scarcity. But here's where most men who learn this lesson learn it incorrectly, and Machiavelli's wisdom becomes essential. They conclude that they should fake indifference, perform unavailability, pretend they don't care. They adopt the external behaviors without understanding the internal reality that makes those behaviors authentic and effective. They become actors playing a role, and women who possess highly calibrated sensors for detecting inauthenticity see through the performance immediately. The result is worse than simple neediness. It's obvious neediness, disguised as false confidence, which triggers both rejection and contempt. The real lesson that comes too late for most men is this: you cannot fake outcome independence. You cannot pretend to be complete when you're actually desperate. You cannot perform abundance from a mindset of scarcity. The behaviors that attract women flow naturally from an internal state where you genuinely don't need any particular woman's validation because you're too busy building something meaningful with your life. This is why Machiavelli emphasized that a prince must actually cultivate power, not merely appear powerful. The appearance flows from the reality, never the reverse. Now we arrive at perhaps the most painful truth men discover decades too late. The very qualities women say they want in surveys and conversations, emotional openness, sensitivity, willingness to compromise, devotion, actively diminish attraction when offered too freely, too early, without the foundation of demonstrated strength and capability. It's not that these qualities have no value. It's that they must be earned through the woman proving herself worthy of them, not offered as an opening bid to win her affection. Machiavelli noted that gifts given freely are rarely valued, while privileges earned through effort become treasured possessions. The same principle governs emotional availability. Think about the man who shares his deepest insecurities on a second date, hoping vulnerability will create intimacy. Instead, he watches interest evaporate before his eyes. Compare him to the man who remains somewhat mysterious, who reveals himself slowly, who maintains boundaries around his inner world until genuine trust develops. The first man believes he's following modern relationship advice. The second man understands the ancient wisdom that Machiavelli articulated. Premature vulnerability signals not strength but weakness, not confidence but neediness, not intimacy but desperation for connection. This creates a cruel paradox. The man who genuinely develops himself, who builds a meaningful mission, who cultivates abundance in his life, naturally displays the qualities that attract women not because he's trying to attract them, but because he's become the kind of man who doesn't need their validation. Meanwhile, the man who focuses primarily on attracting women, who makes romance his central mission, who defines his worth through female approval, repels the very women he desperately wants. Success in attraction comes only to those who've transcended the need for it. Machiavelli observed that fortuna, fortune, fate, circumstance favors the bold, but boldness itself only comes from those who've already secured their internal kingdom. You cannot act with confidence when your sense of self depends on external validation. You cannot display attractive certainty when you're plagued by internal doubt. You cannot offer genuine strength when you're weak at your core. This is why the journey toward becoming attractive to women must begin with a journey away from seeking their approval, toward building something that matters independent of their response. Consider how this plays out over the course of relationships. Most men enter with a frame that they must maintain the woman's interest through continued effort, attention, and accommodation. They slowly sacrifice their boundaries, compromise their values, neglect their mission, all in service of keeping her happy. And they watch, confused and hurt, as her attraction steadily diminishes. What they're witnessing is the inevitable consequence of violating the fundamental law. Machiavelli articulated, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." And in the context of romantic relationships, it is better to be respected than adored if you cannot be both. A woman's adoration without her respect is worthless and temporary. Her respect without adoration is sustainable and can grow into something deeper. The man who maintains his standards, who holds his boundaries, who refuses to compromise his core values even at the risk of losing the relationship. This man keeps attraction alive because he's communicating something essential. He values himself more than he values her approval. This sounds harsh, even cruel, but it reflects how attraction actually functions beneath the polite surface. We desire what we cannot fully possess. We pursue what remains slightly beyond our reach. We value what doesn't need us. The man who makes himself completely available, emotionally and temporally, eliminates the very tension that keeps desire alive. So the young diplomat in Florence, the modern man swiping through dating apps, the devoted boyfriend watching his relationship crumble, despite his best efforts, they're all learning the same lesson that Machiavelli tried to teach 5 centuries ago. The qualities you thought would win love often repel it. The virtues you cultivated to deserve affection frequently destroy attraction. The very strategies you employ to keep someone push them away. And by the time you understand this, you've often already lost what you were trying so desperately to keep. The tragedy isn't that these truths exist. The tragedy is that we learn them through accumulated failures, when we could learn them through studied wisdom. Machiavelli wrote, "The prince not to celebrate cruelty, but to illuminate reality as it exists rather than as we wish it to be." In matters of power and attraction, fantasy kills more dreams than harsh truth ever could. The man who understands how desire actually works, who accepts the uncomfortable realities of attraction, who builds himself according to what actually creates magnetism rather than what should theoretically work, this man discovers something remarkable. When you stop seeking validation, people seek you. When you stop chasing approval, others chase yours. When you build a life so compelling that romance becomes merely one component rather than the organizing principle, you suddenly find yourself with more romantic options than you can manage. This isn't manipulation. It's alignment with how human psychology actually operates beneath the layer of social conditioning that tries unsuccessfully to override millions of years of evolutionary programming. The greatest wisdom Machiavelli offered wasn't about specific tactics or techniques. It was about embracing reality over fantasy, accepting human nature as it exists rather than as we wish it to be, and building strategy based on what actually works rather than what we think should work. In love as in power, the man who faces uncomfortable truths wins, while the man who clings to comforting illusions loses. Most men learn this distinction too late, after the best opportunities have passed, after they've already paid the price for their naivety. But you're reading this now. You have the chance to learn from Machiavelli's observations rather than from your own painful mistakes. You can accept that attraction operates according to laws as fixed and unyielding as gravity, laws that care nothing for fairness or justice or what anyone thinks should be true. You can build yourself into the kind of man these laws reward rather than the kind they punish. You can stop wondering why things don't work the way you were promised they would and start succeeding in the world as they actually exist. The question is whether you'll act on this knowledge or file it away as interesting theory, whether you'll let it transform your approach or simply add it to your collection of insights that never become practice. Most men will read about these principles, nod in recognition, then continue making the same mistakes, because changing requires abandoning comforting beliefs about yourself and the world. But those few who genuinely internalize these lessons, who rebuild their approach from the ground up based on what actually works rather than what should theoretically work, they discover a level of success in attraction and relationships that once seemed impossibly out of reach. This is what we learned too late about women, about attraction, about the nature of desire itself, not because the information is hidden, but because accepting it requires surrendering cherished illusions about fairness, justice, and the narrative we were told about how the world operates. Machiavelli understood that princes who cling to idealistic notions of how power should work lose their kingdoms to those who understand how power actually works. The same principle governs every domain of human interaction, where status, attraction, and influence determine outcomes. The torch has burned low in the palazzo. The young diplomat has long since left, carrying with him knowledge that will transform his understanding of human nature. The question now is what you do with the same knowledge. Will you be among the few who learn these lessons early enough to benefit from them, or among the many who discover them only after the cost of ignorance has already been paid? The choice, as always, belongs to you. But understand that choosing ignorance because truth is uncomfortable still counts as a choice, and choices always have consequences. If this video resonated with something deep within you, if you recognize yourself in the young diplomat's confusion or Machiavelli's wisdom, then you're ready for more. Subscribe to this channel because we don't deal in comfortable lies or reassuring platitudes. We explore the uncomfortable truths about human nature, attraction, power, and success that most content creators are too afraid to touch. Hit that like button if you want the algorithm to show this to other men who need to hear it, men still operating under the illusions that once held you back. Drop a comment sharing your own experience learning these lessons the hard way, because your story might be the wake-up call someone else desperately needs. And share this video with a friend who's still trapped in patterns that will never bring him what he actually wants. The journey from ignorance to understanding is one we all must take, but having a guide makes the path shorter and less painful. This channel exists to be that guide. Welcome to the brotherhood of men who've chosen reality over fantasy, who've decided that uncomfortable truth serves them better than comforting lies. Welcome to those who understand that Machiavelli wasn't teaching cruelty but clarity, not manipulation but mastery over self and circumstance. There's more wisdom waiting in the next video, more insights that could transform how you see everything. The question is whether you're ready to keep learning. I'll see you there.